Welcome everyone. Good evening from Copenhagen. In this HateFree Talk, we'll talk to two founders of the social enterprise called Elderlearn, Andreas Reventlow and Niklas Stenfeldt. Their organization connects seniors and migrants throughout Denmark. They visit seniors at home and learn Danish with them. What are the benefits? Does such a project have any security risks? How do Danes treat people coming to live and work in Denmark? And indeed, we will ask them, is integration generally successful here? Those of you who are watching can ask your questions in the comment section under the stream at Facebook page of HateFree Culture. Andreas, Niklas, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Now, my first question is obvious. What do you do in Elderlearn exactly?
So basically, we match foreigners with elderly Danish people. And by matching these two groups, they benefit from each other. So the elderly will teach the foreigner Danish, tell about traditions, tell about how society works, and share their experiences from a whole life. On the opposite, the foreigner will gain a lot of knowledge, of course, and will be able to share his or her view on Denmark as well, and maybe the country they are born in.
So the way that it works is that if you come to Denmark as an immigrant, if you're from another country, you can sign up to our service, and then we will find some elderly person living very close to you. And then you go to their home once a week and have this cultural and language exchange.
How do you actually find people for the program?
So we have the two target groups. If you look at the migrants and the foreigners participating, they are very online. So Facebook, social media in general, Instagram, of course. They see what we do and how we work on these platforms. But we also have partnerships with language schools and different schools all over Denmark. Of course, word of mouth. If you have a friend from the same country where you come from, they will, speak and recommend each other what works, how do they teach and learn Danish. And if you look at the elderly participants, they are not as online as the younger target group, but when we are in national television or in newspapers or radio or what do you call them? Activity centers for elderly people. They will see posters from us, and maybe the public, the caretakers, they will recommend it for the elderly people.
So I think what we've been very fortunate with is having two very specific target groups. So we want to find some immigrants who are learning Danish, and we have had a lot of luck finding them through all kinds of media, but also they are, per definition, almost in the language schools. That's where you learn Danish. And then we wanted some elderly people, and preferably some elderly people who are a little bit frail, maybe who get some help from the state. And that's kind of easy to know where to look for them as well, because you just go to the state care facilities or to the home care facilities and so on, and then you can find these elderly people who are in need of care. And the reason why we want to find as many elderly people in need of care as possible is because it enables them to do volunteer work. And a lot of people want to do volunteer work, but if you are so old that you are not able to leave your home anymore, it is almost impossible to do volunteer work. But in this way, where an immigrant comes to your home and practices Danish with you, then it becomes possible. And we find that that's one of the very unique things about what we do, that we enable even frail elderly people to become volunteers.
How many matches were there so far, and how many matches would you like to see in future?
So we were heading to 1,500 matches But then something called Corona came, and it was quite difficult for us to continue doing the matches all over Denmark. But we will reach around 1,500 matches soon.
Yeah. And how many meetings do you think you already organized since you started?
Oh, a lot. Thousands of meetings.
I mean, our best guess has been like 10,000 meetings spread across all these. We've made almost 1,000 matches currently, and it just keeps on adding up because people keep on meeting. We have some cases where people have met for more than 3 years and are still going strong, almost since the beginning of Elderlearn.
And the foreigners, I would be very interested in where do they actually come from? Is it few countries or
it's
more countries?
It's I think we were quite amazed when we saw the data on the nationalities. So we have more than 100 nationalities. I think maybe 115 different nationalities participating. And the biggest groups in Denmark right now is India, Poland, and the last one is
Syria.
Syria, yeah.
Syria.
Yeah.
I think it would be interesting to take a guess if you think that these three groups are matching the number of people from these countries, or is it rather that the foreigners from these countries are very eager to learn Danish and Danish culture?
I think that's a great question, and I don't know the exact numbers underlying it, but I would be fairly confident in guessing that they somewhat represent the nationalities that are also most represented in Denmark. And then I think they also represent some of the nationalities that come to stay for the long term. I think generally we appeal to people who are in Denmark to stay either because they have a job long term or they found a partner, and I don't know if that's the case, but definitely with these nationalities, but definitely we generally have people who are here for the long term, and in the case of the Syrian refugees, that's definitely the case, and I would guess it's the same for most other countries that partake with us. But I can imagine that, say, a lot of people from the US come to work in Denmark for maybe only 2 years, and we wouldn't have them volunteering with us. So that could be a country that would potentially be underrepresented. So that's just some guesswork. I'm not 100% sure.
Nevertheless, I think it's really interesting that there is same desire to learn Danish from Syrian refugees as from Polish people. Are all of your clients volunteers, both migrants and seniors?
Yes. So both of them are volunteers. They do it because they both want to learn or create value. No payment, they sign up because they want to participate. So 100% volunteer based.
We will talk later about your approach to volunteering, but my question now is quite practical one. How do you actually get money then if it's not a paid service and it's not an NGO? You have a social enterprise. How can you profit?
It's a great question. And when we started out, we were also a bit nervous about that part because there wasn't really a business model from the start. But obviously you need one if you want to survive in the long term. And we have two main revenue streams. So the main one is municipalities in Denmark. The municipalities are kind of local governmental structures with between 20,000 people to 500,000 people. It differs from country to country how big the municipalities are, but that's how they are in Denmark. And they take care of integration and elderly care. So they are an ideal customer in the sense of them wanting to improve the chances of doing well for both those groups. And then we also have had quite a bit of charitable funding to support kind of just the course of helping integration and elderly care.
You have mentioned that you work all over Denmark. Is that correct? Are you able to work everywhere, even places like Greenland?
We didn't do any matching in Greenland yet, but yeah, we are able to manage the matching all over Denmark from our office in Copenhagen. But of course, we need to, if we partner up with a municipality, we will go and do like local, not research, but networking. We will go to different activities, events, and we will promote amongst, if it's an elderly activity event to inspire what kind of things you can do in the local community. We will go and promote Elderlearn, of course. And if we do this systematically over a period of time, slowly we will start to get organically sign-ups from this local community. So the matching process is quite remote. When we started out, we actually had a not very scalable model. So we were personally showing up for all the meetings. So every time we did a new match, one of our colleagues showed up for the meeting to ensure safety, to ensure that everything went well. But actually, we realized quite quickly that by showing up as a third person to this one-on-one match, we were interfering with the connection between the two people. Suddenly, we became an authority or a teacher, and it was not a clean connection between the two people meeting. So I think it was start of last year. So for 2 years maybe, we didn't show up. We didn't plan to show up for the first meetings, and yeah, they don't ask for the participants don't ask for the service anymore.
I think there's another point to the whole are we able to work in all of Denmark? And I think what Niklas mentioned is the most important point, that yes, if we don't have to show up for the first meeting. And another point is the demographic of it. So I first of all, Denmark is a very small country, which makes it easier, it has to be said. But I think in many countries, and Denmark is no exception, the big cities have a lot of young people and a lot of people from other countries. And the more rural parts of a country have a lot of old people and not too many people from other countries. And that's the same in Denmark. But what has happened in the last years is that Denmark has had a relatively large inflow of refugees, mainly due to the war in Syria. And when refugees arrive in Denmark, they kind of, I don't know exactly how it works, but they end up living in different parts of the country, not only in the major cities. They can kind of end up living almost anywhere in Denmark. And that means that almost anywhere in Denmark has had immigrants who were interested in learning Danish and interested in meeting elderly people. So that's kind of probably been a factor in making it relevant in most parts of the country as well.
If I remember correctly, you actually have a lot of people in the queue, a lot of foreigners that are waiting for the match. Is that correct?
That's true.
Yeah, so around 700 foreigners waiting to get a match.
Yeah, and I think a majority of them are waiting in Copenhagen, where there's just huge demand to learn Danish.
And I wanted to ask quickly only if when you're dealing with the municipalities, are they excited for the idea, or it takes a lot of convincing?
So when we started out, of course, this was not a common thing to do, and there was no best practice or any track record. So we needed to start somewhere. And luckily for us, we can see that the first municipalities we signed up with, they are still doing partnerships with us. So every year they renew the partnership, and that's a good sign. But of course, when we start to work with the bigger municipalities like Copenhagen, it's a huge company, if you can say so, with a lot of employees. To navigate in this within this space is quite difficult. So it took us almost 2.5, almost 3 years to get the right network within just one municipality, and now quite good connections in Copenhagen municipality. So slowly, yeah, we can see other municipalities, they contact us because they have seen us in media or was recommended by other municipalities, they have like network groups to share knowledge and so on. So yeah, we don't need to convince that much anymore. But right now we have a special situation due to the virus, that we don't know actually how the process will look as soon as the country will opens up. We know that there is a lot of focus on elderly people because they have been quite isolated and are in the risk of getting very sick of this virus. But we are not sure how it will be from within the next six months.
I remember that in the beginning of this interview you mentioned like how does the security work for what we do, and that was a big question at first because when nobody had heard about sending immigrants into the home of elderly people, a lot of these municipalities were like, well, how is that even possible, and won't they get robbed, and all kinds of negative assumptions were out there. And that wasn't only the municipality, it was just kind of general that a lot of people we met were very skeptical of the security of the concept. And then we started doing it in a few municipalities at first, and then more and more. And we have really pushed all the great stories that we have on social media or in printed press or like wherever people wanted to bring these small stories about successful meetings between immigrants and elderly people. We've tried to get them out there. And I think we are starting to feel that in Denmark now, that it's, I feel like it's way more normal when we go somewhere. They're like, oh, okay, we've heard of Elderlearn. Yeah, of course you can send an immigrant to the home of an elderly person. Like now it's kind of default. It's assumed that will obviously be a super good idea. But that wasn't the vibe we were getting at the very beginning. And yeah, so we're very happy that has changed. And I think that's part of the point of Elderlearn as well, to try to change that kind of mentality a bit as well.
I think the security issue is something that comes to mind quite quickly for a lot of people. So let me ask you, how does it exactly work? How does security work in Elderlearn, and how do you make sure that people are protected? We can start, as you mentioned, on the side of the seniors. How do you make sure that this is not misused by that there is no criminal acts?
Yeah, first of all, the process of signing up on our platform is that if you are an immigrant or foreigner, you have to provide your criminal record. So we get a criminal record. We check if there is any records of criminality on it. And so far we have had three records which we could not approve. And yeah, so that's under 1% of all participants. And yeah, I think that's the first filter we have. You cannot participate if you have any kind of criminal record. But then if you look on the other side, if you really want to do criminality, then is it smart to sign up on a platform, provide your personal information, your criminal record, all the information we need? We have a process of how we onboard foreigners or immigrants on our platform. So we will call them. We will ask about, what do they like, and do they study, do they work, what is their history? We want to learn their story, because when we do the matching, we want to do a perfect match, of course, the best match possible. So if you go through this whole process and you want to do some kind of criminal act when you visit the elderly person you have been being matched with, it's not very clever. If you want to do criminality, it's easier to go to a area where a lot of elderly people lives, and you knock on the door and you will say, hey, I'm the doctor, or I'm the electrician, or I do COVID testing, or it would be much easier. So I don't see Elderlearn as a facilitator for doing criminality at an elderly person's home.
I think another point is that we've made almost 1,000 matches now, and there hasn't been any kind of crime committed. And even the only bad experience we've had was actually the immigrant who had a bad experience, because she was with someone who suffered from dementia, an old man. And now we're very careful with who we match with people suffering from dementia and how we do it. But back then we didn't quite know the issues that could happen. And this old man simply undressed in front of her. It was in a nursing home, so she just kind of left the room and called the staff. And that has only happened with someone with dementia, and there wasn't like any like she wasn't scared or anything. Like he was like really frail and just weirdly took off his clothes. So I think it just goes to show that a lot of these assumptions about what might be dangerous in making people meet each other are completely kind of upside down in a way. I mean, the person who can be the most intimidating is someone who has dementia and who cannot get out of his bed. And even though that's a really rare case, it's just kind of a curious example. That being said, we do constantly try to make it more secure. So what we've been working on lately, testing out, is that people upload a picture of their ID, and then also a selfie where they kind of show, there's the camera, some fingers. And then it's a randomized amount of fingers. And this way we know that they can't have just kind of, hopefully not found this picture online. So that we're almost certain that that is their actual ID and that is the actual person, and we have a photo of them and all that kind of stuff. So even though we kind of don't find it necessary, we keep on pushing for making it even more secure.
I think it's fair to say that if there is no crime after at least 10,000 meetings, it seems to be very secure, actually more secure than maybe sometimes just walking the street.
I can add to that. If you're very critical, you will say, so the criminal record you get in Denmark is only of your activities in Denmark. So if you came from another country to Copenhagen or to another city in Denmark and you get the criminal record, what you did in your home country or where you came from originally, we don't know. So that's if it's not a bulletproof process to gather the Danish criminal record, but it's the best we can do, and we don't have any problems so far.
So it's a very bulletproof. It's very hard to fake it. It has to be your own. You have to use kind of a national ID thing to log in and get it and all that kind of stuff. So there's an extra measure in that as well.
I think it really makes sense if you say that it wouldn't be very practical to use Elderlearn for criminality, since you have to give up your ID. Let's talk a little bit about the other side. How are foreigners protected? How do we make sure that they are not somehow verbally, sexually abused? How do you make sure that this doesn't happen?
I mean, that's a fantastic question, and relating to the incident that I just described about the man with dementia, that has been the only case that we have kind of had where someone felt a bit uncomfortable. And it has to be stressed that she only felt a bit uncomfortable. We talked to her afterwards. It wasn't like a big deal for her, but obviously for some people that would have been very uncomfortable. And we have had kind of elderly Danish men who aren't that old, maybe let's say early 60s. There's been one guy who called in and was like, "Hey, can I be matched with a young girl from Thailand?" And we were like, "Well, sorry, we can't match you based on nationality." And he was like, "That's fine, as long as it's a young girl." And we were like, "Sorry, mate, can't match you with someone who's we can't match you based on gender, so it'll just randomly be whoever it is." And then he was like, "It's fine, I don't want to be part of it." And what we learned from that is just that we don't allow people to choose what gender they want to meet with. So it's just random, but unless they want to choose someone of their own gender, then that's okay. Some women, elderly women, or some women who are here to learn Danish wants to meet only women, and we're like, that's fine. It rarely happens with the men, to be honest. They don't care, or some of them, as we mentioned, want to meet women. But if they want to meet women and they say so to us, we make sure that they only meet a man. So we definitely take that seriously, and that's kind of how we go about it.
again, I guess one might say that it would be kind of ineffective and unpractical. There are probably lots of other easier ways of engaging in a contact that is potentially dangerous. So it doesn't make much sense to use Elderlearn. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have the exact same process. We do interview with the elderly people. We ask about their history, their lives, activities and stuff like that. So it will be quite unpractical to use this as a dating service or to do criminality.
Mm-hmm. I think maybe we can add to the story of the person with dementia that is something that can happen. It's not in the control of the person. It can be one of the effects of dementia, this kind of losing of sexual restrictions. So that was definitely not an intention, I guess, on the side of the man. So we covered security. I think there is one question from the audience, from Magdalena. She's asking a little bit about the application. If you can if you can explain in a bit of a detail.
Yeah.
What is it for? What does it actually say? Is there a contract? I need to go there. I need to do that, or is it quite loose?
It's quite. It's not very strict. It's like a sign-up formula. Of course we need your basic information. We need your name, your age, country, some personal information. Of course, address is quite important because we do the matching on distance between where you live and where you have to meet the elderly person. In the start, we didn't have any material in any other languages than Danish, because you need the basic language skills to participate. You need to be able to say my name is and have a basic have some basic language skills. But to be sure that all our participants understand like the different, not rules, but we have some guidelines. We did a translation to I think it's 7 different countries, not countries, languages, and it's about, for example, when you agree on meeting, let's say Wednesday at 3 o'clock, it's not 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock or 2 o'clock, it's 3 o'clock. And if you're not able to make it till 3 o'clock, you will inform the person you are meeting with. It's also some kind of expectations about that you meet every week, at least for 1 hour every week. But we are so flexible about this, because if you want to meet twice a week or every second week, 3 hours every time you meet, it's quite flexible. But we see in general, people, they meet almost every week, almost 1.5 to 2 hours. So it's it's flexible, because some people have a busy schedule. If you have family or kids or you work a lot in different periods. We need to have a flexible solution.
I can add as well that we don't see it so much as an application process, more of just a sign up. And the only things that you have to do is that you have to have a basic level of Danish so that you can communicate in Danish. And you have to kind of want to meet the elderly person for at least 3 months. But then after that, it's just about who is the best match for the elderly person available. So it's not about like kind of how, like when you signed up or how good you are or anything like that. It's just about, are you a good fit for this elderly person? And if you are, we'll match you. And it doesn't kind of have to do with the application as such. It's just kind of, I mean, it's not an application in the sense that we reject some people. It's just a sign up, and then we match as many as we can.
What about cultural differences in the matches? Different habits, different rules of different cultures. Have you ever ran into any trouble? Somebody possibly, as an example, somebody possibly refusing to meet with a person of another religion, another sexual orientation, anything like that?
Yeah, so first of all, one of the cultural differences we really like is that if you don't have to travel much further than Southern Europe, where you have a quite different relation to your family. So the elderly people in a lot of countries is wise people, and you live together a longer time compared to Denmark. So a lot of the foreigners and immigrants from different countries, they really respect the elderly people compared to maybe the Danish way, and that is just perfect for this service. The relation between the two people matched is growing much quicker than we expected. But if you look at some of the, call it negative or difficult perspective of the cultural differences, we have had some people saying, I want to meet with a Christian person, or I want to meet with someone who is, with a specific religion or something like that. But it's nothing. It's not something we see every day. It's very rare.
I think, to put a positive spin on it, in most cases, the cultural differences are exactly what makes it interesting. So a lot of these, the elderly people, they a lot of them can't travel anymore. So this is kind of like their way of traveling. There's someone from a whole different culture with a whole different way of seeing things that comes to their home, and just they can ask them anything. And in the same way, when you come as an immigrant to another country, as Nicholas mentioned, with different countries having different relations to their grandparents, say, that's definitely something you don't have when you move to another country. You won't have your grandparents there most of the time. And that means that for an immigrant to get to know an older generation in Denmark is actually very interesting, because they generally only meet people their age or slightly older or younger. Maybe kids as well, because they have kids who are in kindergarten with Danish kids and so on, but very rarely old people. And I think that's just such an interesting gap to bridge, and the cultural differences are kind of what makes it fun. I think one of the main cultural differences that we encounter, which is just like a silly small one, is what Nicholas mentioned before about the punctuality. In Denmark, we are ridiculously punctual. Generally, I think, compared to most other countries, like we are kind of German in that way, and that really depends on where you're from, how seriously you take punctuality. But I can promise you that the elderly people that we have partaking, they take it very seriously. So that's definitely a thing that sometimes people misunderstand each other a bit. We had a time which was kind of it wasn't a big deal in Elderlearn, but it was. There was a time where people had to shake the hands of, I think it was like the local mayor, in order to get citizenship in Denmark. So there was a big debate about who would not shake hands of who and so on. So during that debate, some of the elderly people were like a bit nervous if they were visited by someone. If like, do you shake hands or do you not? But no one really cared. Like it was just kind of a curiosity. Like, is that a thing you do or not? Okay, if you don't, then we just kind of do a bow or whatever. Like no one cared. At least from the people who partook with us. So it hasn't really been issues, it's more been curiosities, I'd say.
I just wanted to make sure, because I guess some people might expect that, especially the religious reasons might be used to refuse some kind of match, but you're saying it's much more about being interesting to each other. So let's maybe go to describing some of the matches that some of the stories that are that you can tell us about.
I think going with the cultural differences, we have one match with which had a slightly sad kind of story play out, but it was a very interesting and fantastic match of an old Danish lady and a young guy who was a refugee from first Palestine and then Syria. And the old lady was Jewish, so they were kind of very culturally different in the sense that their respective cultures generally don't get along very well, and they got along fantastically. Like they had just the best relation. But what happened was that we thought that was such a fantastic story that it ended up getting media coverage, and that had a bit of a backlash on this young guy from Palestine and Syria. Because some people didn't quite accept that he was befriending someone of Jewish background, and that's kind of the sad ending. But the beautiful kind of part of it was that they met and they kind of crossed these differences and became really good friends and had being a refugee in common. She was so old that she had actually been a refugee during the Second World War, and it was just I think one of the most interesting matches that I have encountered of ours. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
Nicholas.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry for passing the ball to you like that. We have lots of stories, but and I can try to bring one up.
This is not a specific story, but in general, you know, if a lot of the elderly people, they sit at home, watch the news in the television, and of course the news sometimes are very good at headlighting some of the stories from robberies or some kind of criminality happening around in Denmark, and they will say it was a person with a foreign background or something like that. So suddenly, if you just watch the news every day, of course you will get the picture of like maybe all immigrants, they are criminal, and so what we experience is if some of the elderly people having this mindset of migrants might be criminal, when they meet with the match, it disappears. All kind of hate or mistrust or disappears. So that's very, you know, that's a beautiful thing to see when two very different people meet, something magic happens.
I have a kind of funny story relating to that, which is I was at a nursing home for this event with like drinking some coffee and eating some cake and stuff like we do at Elderlearn, and then I met this old guy who had been visited by a relatively young woman from Pakistan for a while, and they'd stopped seeing each other. And I asked like kind of how was it and what did you think of it? And he just like coldly said, "Oh yeah, I really miss her." And then he proceeded to say, even though she was, and then he just said something that I won't repeat here, like a really bad racist slur. And it was so weird because on the one hand, he was able to say this thing, which is horrible. But on the other hand, he absolutely adored this young woman from Pakistan. And it was just interesting to see how someone can actually be a little quite even racist. But then in the concrete cases, when they get to know someone from the countries that they generally talk badly about, then that view changes in the specific case, and that kind of builds a little bit of trust, we hope, for him to kind of also accept the next person from Pakistan or another country that he would normally be less inclined, critical about. So that I think that was a really interesting story. But I think on a more positive note, and generally we just have so many stories about people celebrating Christmas together, people celebrating Easter, people celebrating, say, Easter, where one of them is Muslim and just wants to see that interesting Danish tradition and wondering what it's like, and people going for walks and trying out cafes and all these kinds of cultural exchanges. There's one where the young guy started playing football with the grandchild of the elderly person, and kind of just all these little stories about integration and cultural exchanges, which we find really fun. But obviously the ones that pop to mind right now are the most outrageous ones. We're not really kind of the more kind of normal, nice stories aren't top of mind, weirdly.
I remember you told me a story about a woman called Love.
Yeah.
Maybe we could share that one. That was particularly heartwarming.
Yeah. So Love. She's from East Africa. She was a regional director of a lot of hospitals, and came to Denmark because of she found a partner, a Danish partner, and I will call her like a power woman.
Definitely.
So she was matched with an elderly woman and instantly became an ambassador, starting to find more elderly people in the local community. Spread the word in her community about participating in Elderlearn, started to do matching, started to create activities with dance events and playing different games. And at least every second month, we received an email with how we could improve, what kind of new initiatives we could, it was just, amazing to get this drive from this woman. And we are still in contact, so it's it's just amazing.
I remember that some of the stories that you encountered are also illustrating that not all the foreigners have an easy time in Denmark, and a match actually can help them. For example, to find to find a new apartment or a job. I remember this lady from Hungary. Was it?
Yeah, it's a beautiful story too. So this lady from Hungary, she moved to Denmark. She lived in an area with quite expensive apartments, so it was not a cheap rent she had. She didn't have a job, or at least not like high-paid job. So it was quite difficult for her to stay with her kid. I think she had a son. And then the elderly lady said, so maybe she was a former recruiter or, some kind of a headhunter or something like that. So she said, very structured. Yeah, we will take you through this process. Now what is your competent? So what is your education? What is your language? Do you speak English? Do you speak Hungarian? So how can we make a perfect match within we have to match you with the company. And I think within 4 months or something like that, she moved, got a new apartment, half the price of the other one she lived in, and got a quite well-paid job in a company with connections to Hungary. So, and then she called us. So now I need a new match. I want to help a new person. So it was a very powerful story too.
We have another question from the audience. Gabriel is asking, how well known is Elderlearn in Denmark? Do you also get any negative responses to your work?
I think it's a very good question about how well known it is. So I don't know exactly how many people know of Elderlearn in Denmark, but I can kind of relate a bit of the answer to the second part of it. And that is that we are not kind of experiencing any criticism on a large scale in any way. I mean, we have the occasional person on Facebook who writes a negative comment, but we don't have any, say, right-wing politicians who criticize the concept or anything like that. And I think in general, Elderlearn is at least in my opinion, obviously, it's difficult to hate because if you are, at least the Danish right-wing or the main sort of Danish right-wing party, their main focus is bettering the living conditions of elderly people. And that's exactly what we try to do. And obviously they probably wouldn't agree with the way we do it, but I think combating loneliness amongst elderly people is that would be one of their main focus points. And that would be one of the positive things you could say about that specific part. There are more right-wing ones where I can't find anything positive to say about them, but this one, they definitely care for the elderly people. And kind of like most people, except for the right wing, want to see integration happen. So I think we've experienced that most people can find a positive part of what we do. And we even had meetings with some people representing this right wing party, which is normally very hostile towards immigration. And we had like a very kind of good chat about what do they like about what we do, what would they change, and so on. So it's been all right. But I think it's important to stress that we don't have any kind of, in my opinion, sort of very true, terrible populists in the Danish political scene. We do have some in the political scene, but we don't. The worst one, at least, that was up for election a couple of years back, he didn't get into the parliament, so we've heard less and less of him, and it's kind of. So I think we're doing okay in that respect, in my opinion. So there's just kind of a difference of opinion, which hasn't resulted in any kind of negative press for us.
I think how well known we are, if you ask amongst people working in municipalities, quite a lot know about Elderlearn because it's a quite new concept and quite innovative. But if you ask people randomly on the street, maybe it's not that well known. But slowly we start, every time we go to a birthday party or dinner or something, and we talk to people we don't know, and they say, "Oh, I heard about Elderlearn." It's more and more common that people heard about what we do, but it's not a very famous thing all over Denmark yet.
I think you did mention loneliness in just previously, and I wanted to ask about that as well. You said your project is also targeting people that are at risk of being lonely, isolated. This is now much more intensive issue during the pandemic. How do you find such people? How do you approach them? Because I assume we can say that most of us don't like to consider ourselves lonely, and seniors probably not as well. So how do you approach that issue? You probably not ask, are you lonely in your application, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic question, and that's I think, again, as I mentioned before, I think one of the best parts about Elderlearn is that even really frail and weak elderly people can do volunteer work, and I think that ties onto how we approach this loneliness issue. Because as you mentioned, we don't ask the elderly people, are you lonely? Do you want to be part of Elderlearn? Because then most of them would just say, no, I'm not lonely, and no, I don't want to be part of Elderlearn, because that would be a bit of an insult. But by asking people, do you want to help someone? And a lot of people want to help someone. And if you are lonely and people come to you and you really do want some company, but you don't know how to reach out, or you don't have, you can't leave your home, or like there can be all kinds of reasons. And then someone asks you, do you want to help someone by getting a visit every week? You'll be like, hell yeah. Like, I can help someone. I'm useful. And you might have not felt useful for a while. And that makes it much easier, in our opinion, to help people who might be lonely. That obviously also means that we can't target lonely people directly, because we don't require people to kind of say that they are lonely. And we don't know how many of the participants that we have who are lonely. I think a lot of them are not. They're just like really strong elderly people. But also a lot of them are lonely. And we definitely just try to recruit through platforms that allow us to get in contact with elderly people who are somehow at risk, like getting home care or being unable to leave their home, all these kinds of things.
You said that volunteering in your as our Elderlearn sees it is a balanced partnership. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah. So if you look from the government side or state perspective on the two groups, foreigners and elderly people, loneliness is quite expensive for the government, for the budgets. It's I think it's around €1 billion a year just supporting the different, I don't know if it's disease or if it's so around €1 billion a year is the cost of loneliness amongst elderly people. And integration of foreigners, which is, if you live in Denmark and you're not integrated very well, you don't have a job or you don't speak Danish or such thing, then the government will look at these two groups as it's two expensive groups. But when we connect the two groups, they create real value. And we are lucky that elderly people and foreigners is the two groups growing, or in how do you say it? They are the two. Yeah. They are the two. Within the next 30 years, the group of elderly people will be the group growing the most, and as well as foreigners. So supply and demand will follow, because if we have more elderly people, we have more foreigners. They're able to help each other. So it's quite win-win.
I think it's really fantastic what you do in terms of both working on integration and on prevention of loneliness, isolation, and providing this kind of match and relationship between people. I think we have a nice comment that I would like to read from Shramania Ruskova, and with this I would like to wrap up this part. And she says that it's very important to actually meet people, not just to judge or listen. You have to listen to what others say. We have to question, I guess, what we see or hear in media. And right now, I would like to move to the last part because we have 10 minutes left, and let's talk a little bit about migration in Denmark in general. So, how are actually Danish people feeling about foreigners, migrants, and their integration?
I mean, I think that's a great question, and it's not a difficult one to answer because people feel a lot of different things. But the comment that you just read is very on point. That there is, I would say, there's a bit of a negative media spin on integration, so that I think there's an maybe unnecessary amount of people who have kind of a negative view on the consequences of integration. And we are hoping to change that. So we are hoping to change that through these stories about how immigrants really benefit elderly people and vice versa. And I think just a country like Denmark will be dependent on having immigrants come as well in the future, because as Nicholas mentioned, the amount of elderly people is growing. And that means that there will be probably too little workforce in a country like Denmark in the future. And the only way to get enough workforce, and I think it's too late to have way more babies, is to have people come to your country from abroad. So, I mean, I hope that what we do helps people remember that and puts a positive spin on immigration. And I think it deserves a positive spin. There's probably truth in some of the criticisms and some of the challenges. It's not to say that it's easy to make it work, but I think if we make integration work, then immigration is fantastic.
One of the topic that people discuss a lot is safety. Is that a common feeling in Denmark as well? Do people fear that Denmark will become less safe because of migration?
I don't think we feel more unsafe, but and we don't have like dangerous areas in Denmark. But of course, sometimes the medias, they create some kind of atmosphere around this. So yeah, I'm not sure if we are very positive. You know, we look at the work we do and the people we talk to. They believe in these kinds of initiatives. But yeah, I don't think so.
I mean, I think a point that Nicholas is almost making in saying that he's very positive is that we have a lot of positive bias. I mean, we meet a lot of positive stories every day. And I think the issue is that since a lot of people in Denmark say elderly people don't meet any immigrants, all they have is the negative stories from the media, and media is often a bit negative biased. So I think that just like by having people meet each other more, it'll hopefully create a more positive bias. But I think you're right that some people are afraid of a country becoming more dangerous. Some people are afraid of losing the classical Danish culture, and some people are afraid of people not getting into work when they come from another country. And I mean, all we can say is that we aren't terribly afraid of this. We think we can make it work really well. But that's definitely a sentiment that you see. This people being afraid of those things in Denmark. That does happen.
Of course, I understand that you're not speaking for the whole country, so I'm definitely asking just for your opinions or feelings. So let me just try to ask one of the questions from the audience, from Lukáš. Would you say that the integration in Denmark in general is successful or is failing? And also, would you say that Danish public in general is rather supportive of integration and migration, or it has become an issue, too much of a challenge for people to accept?
Yeah, a great question, and a tricky question again. My intuitive kind of reaction would be that Denmark has been quite, at least on like the population basis, there's been a lot of people doing a lot of work to welcome refugees in these last years when the refugee crisis was at its peak. So there was definitely a lot of positive media stories, a lot of positive sentiments about kind of trying to help out the Syrian refugees. And then in terms of immigration, then the general view is probably a bit more negative, I'd say, in a lot of Denmark. But I'm a bit more unsure about that. But I think definitely a positive story is that the refugees, there was a lot of good stories about people welcoming refugees when the Syrian refugees were coming in.
One of the just a quick question there. One of the widely debated topics in Czech Republic are so-called no-go zones. They are mentioned to be existing in Berlin, Paris, Malmö, big cities in Western Europe. And a lot of times they just are a myth. Is there anything like a no-go zone in Denmark, a place that you would not go to, that you're scared to go, that public is scared to go, the places of high criminality?
So I think personally, I'm not afraid of going anywhere in Denmark. And we don't have such no-go zones. We have, of course, what we call ghetto areas with a certain population of people living in a area. And sometimes we have had some, call it problems with maybe police. They are not, they don't feel safe going to this area for a certain time, or but it's more kind of a short-term activity if someone is not agreeing in, I don't know. So it can be a lot of different different reasons why, but we don't have like specific no-go zones.
I think one of the kind of curious and funny and interesting things we've experienced is that a lot of the places in Denmark where there lives the largest amounts of immigrants are, or like at least sometimes there are a lot of immigrants living in social housing, and a lot of elderly people live in social housing as well. So it kind of like it fits together.
Yeah.
And obviously there are lots of different opinions about where you can go and not go, and we are not like generally positive as well on this regards. But I think just a funny curiosity is that a lot of the people with a lot of immigrants have a lot of elderly people as well, because they're just cheap housing.
So we have 2 minutes left, and that calls for my last question. Obviously, what are your plans? What is the future of Elderlearn?
Yeah, we were hoping you'd ask this question.
Yeah.
Because we saw this as a brilliant platform to reach out and mention that we are hoping to take the initiative abroad, and the way we're hoping to take it abroad is by doing a kind of a franchise where we find a great partner in another country that could be in the Czech Republic, and then we give them all the materials, the access to an IT system that makes it really easy to do the work we do, and that would be fantastic. So if anyone out there wants to reach out, then elderlearn.dk or .com or whatever you want, you can find our email addresses, and please reach out.
Thank you very much. I think maybe we can later share the the contact under this video for anyone who is interested in learning more about Elderlearn or contacting you in person via email or by phone. It was a real pleasure. Thank you for sharing about your success in social enterprise called Elderlearn. Thank you very much, everyone who was watching. We wish you a pleasant evening from Copenhagen, and we'll see you with another HateFree Talk soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.